also segregated, that took both William Barbee and John, but nobody would take me. The white ambulances refused to take me, and so I kind of lay on the tarmac for a while. And finally it was Floyd Mann who asked one of his associates if he had, where his car was parked, and they were the ones that took me to the hospital.
Freedom rider Jim Zwerg recounting his experience of being attacked by a mob at the Montgomery bus station in May 1961. Zwerg was a student from Wisconsin. Bernard Lafayette was on the first Nashville to Montgomery Freedom Ride and is currently a professor at Emory University's Candler School of Theology. This is Democracy Now! We'll be back with them in a minute.
Turn me round, turn me round, turn me round, ain't gonna let nobody, Lordy, turn me round, keep on a-walking, yeah, keep on a-talking, Lordy, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let segregation, Lordy, turn me round, turn me round, turn me round, ain't gonna let segregation, Lordy, turn me round, keep on a-walking, yeah, keep on a-talking, yeah, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let no jailhouse, Lordy, turn me round, turn me round, turn me round, ain't gonna let no jailhouse.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. As we continue with the Freedom Riders, the Right Reverend Bernard Lafayette and Jim Zwerg, I want to play a powerful clip from Stanley Nelson's documentary Freedom Riders. This is about civil rights activist Diane Nash from Nashville, Tennessee. It begins with John Siegenthaler, who was the assistant to then Attorney General Robert Kennedy. During the Freedom Rides, he had been sent to the South as the Kennedy administration's chief negotiator with Alabama Governor John Patterson.
My phone in the hotel room rings, and it's the Attorney General. And he opens the conversation. Who the hell is Diane Nash? Call her and let her know what is waiting for the Freedom Riders. So I called her. I said, I understand that there are more Freedom Riders coming down from Nashville. You must stop them if you can. Her response was, they're not going to turn back. They're on the way to Birmingham, and they'll be there shortly. You know that spiritual, like a tree standing by the water, I will not be moved. She would not be moved. And I felt my voice go up another decibel and another, and soon I was shouting, young woman, do you understand what you're doing? You're going to get somebody, do you understand you're going to get somebody killed? And there's a pause, and she said, sir, you should know we all signed our last wills and testaments last night before they left. We know someone will be killed.
That was John Siegenthaler talking about Freedom Rider Diane Nash in that excerpt from Freedom Riders. We go back now to my conversation with the Freedom Riders, Jim Zwerg, and now the Dr. Reverend Bernard Lafayette, who were also, like Diane Nash, student activists in Nashville, Tennessee in 1961. In the film Freedom Riders, it points out that Jimmy Hoffa, the Union chief, said no bus drivers, Greyhound or Trailways, was it, are going to ride these buses. They're not going to drive them.
I guess it was a union issue, but they knew it was very dangerous when someone would burn the bus like they did in Anniston, Alabama. It was not safe for whites or blacks, even whites who were not involved in the Freedom Rides, but just passengers. This mob that had no regard for anyone, and they just followed these buses, and they attacked them. And they were very, indiscriminate.
But a driver did step forward to drive you.
Yes, on the condition that his supervisor would ride with him.
Jim Zwerg, did you think President Kennedy, Attorney General Bobby Kennedy, were on your side?
At the time, I've got to say, I don't think it was really a major issue that we were contemplating. We were so concerned that that we felt the ride continue, that nonviolence had to show that it could overcome whatever violence you threw at it, that we would ultimately prevail, that it wasn't, for me anyway, a politically motivated thing one way or the other. It was...
The marshals were eventually brought in.
Yes.
And where were they in this journey? Bernard Lafayette.
Well, they came when the mob surrounded us at the church. The federal marshals came in. When
Dr. King was inside.
Yes.
And the other leaders.
Exactly. This mob would not go away. They threw bricks and broke stained glass windows in the church.
How many outside?
About 3,000.
How many of the people were inside, the civil rights activists?
Probably about 1,500.
Dr. King was on the phone with Attorney General Bobby Kennedy?
Yes, he was, and Diane Nash as well.
Diane Nash, the civil rights leader as well.
Right, she was our youth leader for our students and that kind of thing. And Martin Luther King represented the adult organizations as well. And James Farmer, who was there with the Corps, he had returned. His father had been funeralized, and he had returned to the Freedom Rides by then. And so far as the Kennedys were concerned, they wanted to get this thing over with. In fact, they wanted to stop it because they didn't want people to get killed. So they asked for a cooling-off period because they couldn't get any support or protection from the governor of Alabama. And in terms of our nonviolent movement, we wanted to continue to move forward, and we were trained in nonviolence. But it's one thing that's not well known that's very important, and there was some taxi drivers there in Montgomery, black cap taxi drivers, and we had received word that they were mobilizing and arming themselves to come and rescue us. And there were a large number of cab drivers and taxi companies in Montgomery because during the boycott, a lot of people started driving their cars. You had 27 black cab companies in Montgomery, and some only had 2 cabs. But the thing that really struck me, and I'll never forget, is that Martin Luther King stood in the pulpit of the church, the First Baptist Church, while the mob was surrounding the church. And he said, I want a few people who really are sure about their nonviolence because we got a special mission. And everybody did not volunteer, including a lot of the ministers. But he got a little group together, maybe about 8 or 10, maybe. He walked out of that church through the mob to dissuade those cab drivers from coming with arms to rescue us. This was before the marshals showed up. And then he walked back through the mob. Now, that is one mystery in the whole thing that I have never been able to fathom.
Daniel in the lion's den.
John Siegenthaler, the president, the attorney general's envoy to you, what happened to him?
Well, I was out, but...
You were unconscious, you mean,
I was
Jim.
unconscious. The story is that he heard and became aware of what was going on, and as he was driving towards the bus terminal, he saw Susan Wilbur and Susan Herman.
They are?
Those were 2 of the white students who were also exchange. Well, one was an exchange student from Susan Herman at Fisk. Susan Wilbur was from Peabody and was from Nashville, wasn't she?
Yes.
As I recall. And as he drove up, there was a young teenager just popping these gals, and he went in and grabbed Susan Wilbur and kind of tried to get her in the car, to get in the car, and she grabbed the side and she said, you know, this is not your fight. Don't get involved with this. I'm trained in nonviolence. And about that moment, somebody got to Siegenthaler and said, who are you? And he said, I'm a representative of the United States government. And somebody hit him with a pipe and he was out.
Let's go to a clip of Freedom Riders.
We did not ask for all of the state police and the helicopters overhead. It was shameful that we could not travel peacefully without that apparatus of protection.
At 11:50 a.m. Central Standard Time, the bus hit the Mississippi line, the Alabama authorities pulling back.
We felt a very strange feeling when they changing of the guard.